This is a video about how to disassemble a Sebac shock. This method works for genuine Sebac shocks, and you can tell if there's an imprint in the casting on the eyes. It'll say Sebac or made in Italy. There are some off-brand ones, but most of them come apart pretty much the same way on this size. There's two different sizes of Sebacs and two different styles. The styles, they're either tapered or they're a straight square bottom. And the springs are either 1 7/8 on the OD or 1 5/8. They're all about the same length, and like I said, they all come apart the same way. So the first thing you're going to do, the hardest part is going to be to get this eye off, and this is the first step. It's aluminum against steel, and after 40 years they corrode. Very difficult to get some of them off, but not impossible. One thing you want to avoid is putting too much heat to it. If you try a torch, you might melt the aluminum. So be very careful. A heat gun would be safer. The method that I like to do, and that's worked best for me, is to hold the shock against a hard surface, block of wood or something underneath to protect it, and tap on the top as you roll it right on that joint. The cap goes in about 3/8 of an inch, and tap on that joint with a wooden mallet or a block of wood, and that'll help break that corrosion loose a little bit. You can soak these for a week, and soaking will never get that off of there, so don't waste your time with soaking. This one's already been taken apart, so it should be easy. So start by mounting it in a vise. Again, we've already got this loose. Be careful on holding this when you're getting this loose. If you use a pipe wrench, you will damage it. One technique you can either use a strap wrench, but it's got to be a good one. The rubber ones tend to stretch and not work very well. If you use a pipe wrench, which I do sometimes, I'll wrap the tube with a wet dry sandpaper, something fairly heavy duty with a cloth back, and if you do 2 or 3 wraps and then use your pipe wrench gently, it'll grip really well with minimum deforming of the tube. You also want to make sure that you put your wrench as close to this taper as possible. If you're using the straight type, as close to the joint as possible, so that I've seen some of these where people took them off and they literally twisted this tube or crushed it. The strongest point is right here at the taper. Okay, so once we've got that loose, first you're going to take that cap off. The tool you're going to need, it's pretty simple, is going to be about a 6-inch extension and an 11mm socket. Standard threads. Inside this tube, right down about here, is a nut that goes on the end of a center rod that's inside. The trick is, though, that it sits down in a little bit of a narrowing taper down here. So the only way to get on this, it's not catching right here. Until I compress this a little bit, then it can grip. That nut comes up and becomes accessible. So what I've got to do is compress. You can create it. You can make a jig with some all thread and blocks of wood or steel, and fit a sleeve over this and use it as a compression tool. But what you've got to do is compress this spring. I just do it the hard way. To me, it's easier, just and quicker. Just push down on it by hand, and you might use 2 people. It takes a little bit of effort, and you'll feel it grip the nut, and there it popped. And sometimes the nut comes out. Be careful when that comes out, not to lose it. This one stayed in, and then it just pulls off like such, and you can see this piece. And turn it over. Be careful. You've got 2 pieces in here. You've got a spring and a little cap nut. So set those aside. And now it's just a matter of pulling this layer by layer. The spring caps come off. Careful with these inserts. You can't really replace these if you can find a source, but they tend to crack, so be very gentle with it. In the spring, here's that center shaft I talked about. This is where the nut goes on. There's an upper cover. Sometimes you only have the upper cover. They're slightly different sizes. Obviously one fits in the other. Sometimes you won't have this lower cover. There's a rubber bushing. I'll take this off, the upper cap. There's a rubber bushing right here that will slide off. No need to take that off in this case. And there you go. That's all there is to it. And then reassembly, same process. I use a little bit of lithium grease before I put these back together after cleaning. And you want to make sure you get the right upper spring cup. Sometimes they're different. This one is made so that you can tell if it's right and put it on. And you want to see it fit into a recess. There's two different styles, so sometimes it doesn't fit quite like that, but you'll figure out which is the top and which is the bottom just by the way it fits. Okay. Goes back on with the dust shield first, then the spring which holds it in. That spring should snap down or sit into that cup. Then the lower dust shield, make sure that you line up the smaller shield inside the larger one, so if you don't get it lined up right, it will crush the shield, and these are tough to find, so you want to take care of it. Then the lower spring cup. And the bottom piece, I'll put a little white lithium grease inside here. There's a plastic sleeve in here. It does not come out. Don't try to take it out. Some have this extra rubber ring on them. You can see it's just a rubber that snaps on. There's a ridge underneath, and that slips on there. Some have them, some don't. Slide that on. You can test the springiness of it, make sure that you've got enough grease on there and it should move smoothly. If you get a shock that's bent, most likely it's that center shaft in there, and you can straighten that shaft and you'll end up straightening your shock. Just takes a little time and a nice hard flat cast iron surface and you'll get it nice and straight. The next step is to find a straw. This is a real sturdy straw that I've got, and it's a large diameter straw. So find yourself a large diameter straw, sturdy. And what this is going to do, I'll take this off to show you, but what this is going to do is you're going to insert this through this tube and use it as a guide. And you're going to want to get it right on the end of this threaded and push it down a little bit so that it sticks on there. So I'm going to put this back. Make sure I've got them lined up. Back in. So I'm going to put my straw in here and I'm going to feel around. It'll fall down in a taper, and I can feel when I get down in the bottom there. And what this is going to do is help me get this spring into place where it belongs and make sure it's on the shaft. Sometimes you have to compress a little bit, but for starters I'm going to just drop it down and that'll slide all the way down. Next thing you're going to want to do is get ready with your nut, and if your socket isn't magnetic you can use the old paper towel trick. Yeah, just get a little scrap. Put that nut in there. You could also put a little grease on there, but you'll see it holds. Get rid of some of this extra. Alright. So here's the tough part. It helps if you have two people, but I'll do it one-handed here if I can. But you've got to compress, remove your straw, start it by hand, and you really have to compress. And you'll feel it grab. You can pull that out. Get the wrench on it here. Again, compress. Tighten it up. Got my paper towel out. Again, a little lithium grease on these threads because you don't want those locking up again. It was a lot of work to get them loose the first time. Hand tighten. And I don't tighten very hard. I just enough to seat it on the stop. Good enough. It's not going to go anywhere when it's installed. And there you've got it.